The challenge for Kingfisher, and the one that I handed to Benedikt, was that we had to invent, in some ways, a new group, because we started with a decentralised and financially driven, almost a conglomerate, operating in very different countries from different routes, and with the added challenge of an Anglo-French balance, because 45% of our business obviously in France and 40% the UK. And we were setting out on a journey which we knew was going to take some time, but for me the attraction was, could we actually turn ourselves into a real retail group, and particularly develop the idea of one team, which is, yes, people have got their day jobs and they've got their operating companies to run, but how do you get them to think about a broader family that they belong to, and that they have the curiosity to understand what's going on elsewhere and the generosity to get involved. And in that is very much a human journey. It's not something you can create with a CEO sending out an email or a message. And what I said to Benedikt was that we have to think like we are an 11 billion startup, because we actually haven't tried to come together before. It's always been kept separate. And we also have no particular fixed idea of how we're going to get one team to become a human reality. So Benedikt literally did get given a blank sheet of paper saying, well, how do we start doing this? Because there was no pre-existing formula. And I don't think there are many organisations that have tried to set out to create out of different international groups one retail team. So we had to create our own formula, our own idea. And the appeal for me of Benedikt's involvement was that he could do it in a way which was a bit unconventional, more of the pirate than the navy, and less of a HR process person, and more interested in how do you really get people to connect intelligently. Because for us the whole point was to understand, well, where do we come together to create value, and to come together to create value rather than just because we want to hold hands because we're part of a group. You first have to have some interest and some human dimension to this. And I think that's what Benedikt provoked out in us, was ways in which we can connect with people. Now, I know he's going to probably talk about some of the individual things that he put us through, and some of the ideas he came up with, which occasionally, frankly, terrified me, or made me think he wasn't entirely being serious with me when he was suggesting them. But the provocations that came up really made us think very differently about how you take what have been conventional conferences or conventional meetings and turn them into something which has real human value. And by focusing on the idea of one team, by giving, I think, Benedikt an opportunity to think differently and behave differently, and not give him a conventional sort of standard internal communications role, he was able to really allow us to start creating the human glue in the organisation that we need, because it's not all about the Anglo-Saxon view of projects or particular things that we can or can't do together. It's about creating the sense of one team and the sense of human contact, and by getting people to behave in different contexts, you know, not death by PowerPoint, but real conversations with real people about real work, and then doing it in ways which forces people to actually really engage rather than just sit back and, you know, delegate it to someone else, because that's what happens when you watch PowerPoint for 3 days. I think Benedikt created a completely different set of interactions and a completely different set of motivations for people. So we started with a blank sheet of paper. We've done a lot of quite fun and crazy things, but they've always been for a real purpose, and the real purpose is about intelligently connecting people and creating a spirit of one team. And that is something that's not going to happen overnight. So we are onto the journey, and frankly, without Benedikt, I don't think we would be here at all. And it's shown me that you need to think differently when it comes to the cultural transformation that we're trying to achieve, and the convergence that we're trying to achieve by bringing out the best of the group, by bringing people together. Over the last 4 years of working with Benedikt, I think what we've discovered is that when we focus on new and innovative ways of bringing people together and giving them experiences that they weren't expecting, it's really important to have an agent provocateur like Benedikt, who will not come up with the standard corporate solution. So The most extreme example probably was his idea of us putting on a show, literally creating the Parliament of the Birds, which I think he'll tell you a bit about, which is something that most people really didn't want to do when they were presented with it, but because they didn't have the option, went through it and discovered a lot about themselves. And I think what that taught us was that you have to occasionally create artificial situations, yes, but experiences for people in order to get them through to the next level of understanding. And I think Benedikt has challenged us in lots of different ways over the last 4 years, but the Parliament of the Birds was probably the most extreme one, I think. Another one was getting me to talk about pictures of my childhood, including me as a baby holding, I think, a bottle of beer at some point. So there's been a lot of different types of challenges, but I think the two key things are, one, they've always been for a mission. So this has always been about developing us as leaders, but as one team leaders. And with that sense of leadership development driving it, then what might seem like a bit of a stunt or a bit of a one-off actually has real purpose and has validity as a result. So that's very important. Secondly, it's always been with the understanding of the type of people we're dealing with, and DIY retail is fairly down to earth. It's real practical people. The métier is quite tangible, and so we've made things work. So, for example, the marketplace idea of exchanging information by selling ideas with people buying them literally with checkbooks works very well for retailers, and I'm not sure, with other industries it will work so well. So you have to pick, if you like, the idea in service of what are you trying to do around leadership, and in service of the type of business, and I think that was really important. So Benedikt has done 4 years of this now, and I'm not entirely sure what role, title he should really have, but to my mind he's the chief animator of the one team spirit inside the business. For the top 250, he has provided an enormous amount of the glue that we've put together, and the spark, and maybe he is a combination of, if you can have such a thing, of glue and fire, to really start fires in a number of places and then provide the glue to keep bringing people together. And there's an important reality there, which is that people have busy day jobs and they don't necessarily want to work at a group level, and I'm sure those of you that have this challenge will recognise it. You have to make it something that's positive, enjoyable and challenging, and I think that's what Benedikt has done for us above all else.